is a beautiful 75-degree day in Southern California. The crowd filing into the Forum in Inglewood.
Inside the Forum at the corner of Manchester and Prairie.
Whether you're kicked back in the lounge or grinding in the film room, the block is always hot for the Lakers.
The Los Angeles Lakers are the world champions of basketball.
It's the Great Western Forum.
Oh, chased down by James. Blocked by LeBron.
The Magic, he pivots a 360 turn. He's around one, he's around two. Magic to Green underneath.
On the ball to Shaq, screen.
A windmill. They're going crazy at the Fabulous Forum.
Hosted by Anthony Irwin, Pete Zayas, and Jovan Buha.
It's showtime.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome into the Great Western Forum. I'm Anthony Irwin, host of this here shindig, joined as always by Pete Zayas of the Laker Film Room Podcast and Jovan Buha of Buha's Block. I was laughing as we were getting ready to go live because at the onset of this, the little clip of us laughing there, we look so much younger, like right before, like literally right before we go live. We have gone through whatever it is.
That's what December through February of this season did to us. That's what those 3 months did.
Pete and I just gave up completely on doing our hair. We're just wearing hats. At
yeah,
this
just
point.
throw the beanie on, man. Yeah, it's like
grown a beard. Like this has been a Lakers season, and we are approaching the home stretch of it. So before we dive into the topics for this here episode, Pete, how you holding up, man? We're like, I can't believe we are like 9 games away from the freaking playoffs.
It's crazy, and I'm having a blast. The Lakers are playing their best basketball that they have in years. Man, this is what we live for as fans, and it's fleeting, and so I'm just trying to appreciate it. I think that it can be difficult, that we can always sort of be like, okay, what's the next thing they can be working on and that they can be getting better at? And of course, that's always there, but you can sort of lose the enjoyment of that within this. And so I hope you guys are having as much fun with this as I am.
Yeah, I can't remember my feelings on a season doing a 180 the way that they have over the past 15 games, right? Like it's just like thinking about where things were at coming off of the Boston loss and the Orlando loss and the Phoenix loss. It felt like that was the low point of the season, and they were really teetering there of which way is this going to go? It started to feel like the rope was slipping away a bit. And then all of a sudden they have that little stretch where palate cleanser with Golden State and Sacramento, and they got a couple blowouts under their belt. And then they lose the close game in Denver. But from that point on, win 9 in a row, a slew of statement wins, and put the narrative to rest that they can't beat teams of a certain caliber, and then have reeled off this stretch here of 13 of 15. And it just, momentum going to the playoffs, looking like they're going to be the 3 seed, could potentially be faced with Houston in round 1, which I think would be a great matchup for them. So this is like the most fun I've had in a season, I would say, going back to like probably 2020, 2021.
Yeah, Pete, you said this is the best basketball that a Lakers team has played in years, and I was like, oh my God, you're right. Oh, and But I also love, Pete, that you mentioned that this is a fleeting thing. And this has been something that I've been focusing on a lot on my show, as far as like, is this real? Is this Lakers team like, who are the Lakers? Are they the team that we saw for most of the beginning parts of the season? Are they the team that we saw from the middle part of the season that was kind of uninspiring? Or are they this most recent version of the team? And part of me is like, okay, we can get around to answering that question. But the other part of me is like, I don't care. This is fun. This is just it. I enjoy watching good basketball. I enjoy when the team that I cover, the team that I grew up rooting for, is good and is fun and is also interesting in like human ways, which is something that I want to talk about over the course of the show as well. So today what we're going to do is kind of look ahead to the final 9 games of the season. We'll catch up a little bit on the most recent 15, of which the Lakers have won 13 with, like Jovan said, a bunch of statement wins, just kind of one after another. Not just who they've beaten, but also how they've won those games has also stood out to me in terms of the variety thereof. So we'll talk about that. I also want to talk, at some point over the course of the show, where the Lakers figure into the title tiers, not just in the West, but also I think in terms of the entire NBA. And I think there are some very real conversations that the national shows, I don't think, want to be happening, that they have to now have. And we can now have that fun here on the show as well. So let's talk about these last 15. Jovan, I'll start with you in terms of, what we've learned and what the Lakers have been up to over these 13 wins that they have racked up in that time. And to me, I think it's fascinating. And there's been, I bet all of our shows have covered this in some way or another in multiple ways. What was the reason for the switch? What happened? What ignited this run? And I actually want to go to the few games before that, where coming out of the deadline, they picked up Luke Kennard, but it wasn't really like the kind of deadline that I think a lot of Lakers fans were hoping for. I know I wanted a starter, didn't obviously get that. They lose a few in a row coming off of that. I remember saying on my show, oh God, I've seen this team let go of the rope in games. I hope that they aren't going to let go of the rope for the season. They grab hold of that rope and they start methodically pulling themselves back into it in a very impressive way. So what's your biggest takeaway from these last 15? As the Lakers, I think, are playing the best basketball of just about anybody in the league.
Yeah, it's tough because would you put me on the spot with one takeaway? I just a bunch of takeaways.
Well, you can rip them off if you want.
Like I think the biggest thing for me has just been the time that they've now had together, and it took longer than I think we all wanted, but it finally clicked in a real way where I think, like, top down, like the coaching staff has figured out. I mean, we were all advocating for Marcus Smart to be the fifth starter and for Rui to come off the bench. And that has played out in a real way in terms of making that shift to Marcus. Like, that group has been great. The Lakers are now winning first quarters and consistently winning those opening shifts, starters versus starters. And the lineup data with the big three has been much more positive, with Marcus out there as the fourth perimeter guy versus Rui as the fourth perimeter guy. So I think, like, that has stabilized. The rotation itself, I think, has been in a really good spot. I've liked the lineup decisions and overall rotation matrix that JJ has had. I think he's pushed a lot of the right buttons with offensive organization, the group running more actions and just having less of these aimless possessions. And then defensively, I mean, they've really rounded into form, and, like, they're not going to be the league's best defense or even necessarily a top 10 defense, but they've been the 13th best defense post All-Star break. And I think that's a sweet spot for this group with their offensive firepower. If they can be top 5 offense, top 12 to 14 defense, that's a really good team that is going to be a tough out in the postseason. Then we get into the more specifics of Luka has been playing best player in the world, MVP caliber basketball for over a month here. You have LeBron embracing this new role as, and I wouldn't even say new role, because he did do this earlier in the season. It's just, I think, like, he was out for a bit. He came back, smaller role. Then Austin went out. Then LeBron assumed a larger role. Then, like, it took a little bit of time to recalibrate that. But JJ came out and said LeBron should be third on the team in usage. That's been the role shift here over the last couple of weeks. Austin has found his footing recently, and, like, he had a month-long stretch there where he was just not the same player. Finally broke out at the beginning of this stretch, and I think he's been playing some of his best basketball of the season, particularly defensively as well. And then you've had DA be re-energized. You've had Jackson now these last few games. So, like, I could go on and on. There's been so many things to be positive about, but I think the big thing has been, like, it clearly took some level of time for this group to coalesce and figure out what lineups worked, what playing style worked. And now you're just seeing a well-oiled machine that beat Denver in a crunch time, led New York wire to wire, had a rock fight with Minnesota, then blew them out in the second half, had a couple of one rock fight against Houston, then, like, another game that was a little bit more high octane, and they won both of those. And it's like, they're just passing every single test, and they got 2 huge tests down the stretch here against OKC, and that's like that's the team to that's the measuring stick. Like OKC is the stick right now. How do they match up with them? But I'm just really excited, and again, with where things were a month ago compared to where things are now, like I think there's been a dramatic shift, and there's just been a lot to be pleased with.
And I'll focus on something that's just simpler in that the Lakers' 3 best players are all healthy at the same time. And this is the first time of the season that they've had that for more than a few games all at once. When LeBron returned, that was essentially his preseason when he came back, and he was nowhere near the player that he's been over this most recent stretch. And then once LeBron did ramp up, that's exactly the point that Austin went out. And so this has been the first stretch where they've all 3 been healthy post All-Star break. They came out of the break. What we beat the Clippers in that first game, and they had a couple losses, right? And it was kind of, people were kind of down, as you were saying, Jovan, like that was near that low point. But I thought they had won like 3 out of 4 by the time LeBron then came back from his little injury, and now everybody's ready to go and really clicking in a way that I just think, Anthony, they needed to be healthy to get some reps in the first place, in a way that, like, it's just the first time they've had that opportunity. And so I know it's a super simple explanation, but along with everything that Jovan said, they just finally got the reps in with everybody available.
Well, the last time we all spoke, right, we assigned grades to guys, and how difficult it was to assign those grades, having everything to do with health. And, every single person that we spoke about, every single entity basically that we spoke about outside of maybe Rob Pelinka, was like, had the heavy disclaimer of where are the reps coming from. And I think it's also worth noting here, not only have they gotten those reps, but they've approached those reps with a real purpose, right? Like, there has been a very, no funny business approach to these 15 games, where like a couple of times the Miami game stands out, right? Where there was this thinking, oh, they're coming off of a big win. They could very easily just kind of take this night off, and it would just be a schedule loss on the second night of a back-to-back. Everybody winds up playing in that one, and they win. The Detroit game, right, when things kind of started slipping away from them a little bit in that one, that looked like the kind of game that earlier in the season they would have lost by 50, but instead they kind of buckled down and made a game out of it. And even the Indiana game, and fourth quarter notwithstanding, the way that they jumped out on top of Indiana, and from the very onset of that game, did not mess with their food. Now they mess with their food to an extent that even my son Miles would be proud of, but in the fourth quarter. But for the most part, just the entire organizational approach to basketball, I think, has really shifted. And that's the kind of thing that only happens, Pete, with leadership. That to me is the only way that happens from a basketball standpoint on an NBA team is if the guys at the top of the roster say, all right, it's time to bleeping focus here. And that's what I think we've seen from Luka and LeBron.
That Miami game really stands out in this respect, and that whole, like, easy to write that off as a schedule loss. And even the moment on the bench where Reddit goes to the bench and is like, I know you guys are tired. LeBron jumps in and is like, I'm not tired. The fact that they played in that game in the first place. And then Austin's like, oh shit, can't let the old man play in this game and I don't play in this game, right? And so that's good. That's good peer pressure. That's exactly what you want. And that to me was a turning point for me.
Yeah, I was incredibly impressed by that. And Jovan, you kind of touched on it as well. The variety of ways that the Lakers have won these, milestone games, these type of like tentpole games on the second half of this season, beating Houston in back-to-back games that look completely different from each other stands out to me. And, beating Denver, a team that has absolutely owned them in the clutch, in a clutch game, really stood out to me. And that is, I think, the source, aside from Luka, Austin, and LeBron kind of figuring things out. We'll talk about that here in a bit. But the Lakers being malleable and winning in this variety of ways, that's the reason I am sitting here saying, you know what? I think they are closer to the OKCs and San Antonios of the world than they are the title that's the title tier that's behind them. What do you think is going into that? Like, is it just the reps? Is there anything, numerically or statistically that you have seen that, points to, or that we can point to as an explanation for that ability in no matter what kind of game they have to play in?
There's been a couple of developments on both sides of the ball. So offensively, they've been a top 6 team in terms of turnover percentage post All-Star break. So they've been doing a great job of taking care of the ball, and you're constantly seeing them in that 10 to 14 turnover range, which I think is a realistic sweet spot to be in. And you really don't want to be hitting the mid to high teens if you can avoid it, and certainly not 20 plus turnovers. So they've cut down on the turnovers. I think part of it's been in some ways simplifying things where it is funneled more through Luka and Austin. And that does lead to sometimes higher usage possessions for those guys, but they can take care of the ball at a high level and distribute it through the pick and roll and different actions. So turnover rate's been a big thing. 3-point shooting has been something that has regressed to the mean in a positive sense. It's stabilized where you now have Luka shooting pretty much been at 40+% on 12, 13 3-point attempts for 3 months now. Steph Curry level shooting and different. He's doing a lot of these contested step backs, and it's insane. But Austin's been shooting the ball better. Marcus has been shooting the ball better. LeBron's quietly been shooting the ball better. He's been shooting less in general, but for a stretch here of over a month, he's been more of a positive catch and shoot guy. Rui has obviously continued to be a steady 40 to 42% 3-point shooter. Luke Kennard's the best shooter in the NBA from a percentage standpoint. So I think looking at now having the big three all with a certain floor as shooters, then you also add in Marcus, Luke, and Rui around them, and the 3-point shooting and spacing from that, and just the gravity and the tough decisions it forces defenses into. That's been another factor offensively. Then defensively, Lakers have forced a lot more turnovers and have been converting points off of turnovers at a much higher rate. So the defensive playmaking with Marcus and Luka, Austin, Jake, all these guys, a lot more stocks for the group. I think that's been at a higher level. And then the 3-point defense, I know some people in the analytics community will point to shot variance and shot luck with some of that stuff, but I think that if you look at the shot quality numbers, that has improved as well. So yes, they might be getting a little lucky with some of the opponent shooting, but they've actually been forcing fewer allowing fewer threes and forcing tougher threes. So I think those two things on both sides of the ball,
shooters.
Fewer
they've also understood who to leave open.
Yeah, you win the possession game more and you shoot better, and then you also limit your opponent's shooting and turn them over more. The Lakers are now starting to shift the math in their favor, which had been an area they had been losing for the first 45, 50 games of the season.
Yeah, I think upping their turnover rate in terms of turnovers forced has been a huge part of them getting into the bottom parts of the top 10 recently of defensive rating, and just being that has become sort of a stabilizing force on when they go through their little stretches where they can't score, they can't put the ball in the hoop, and they're kind of they're in the mud. That first Houston game I thought was a great example of that, of a quarter where they were 1 for 14 in the fourth quarter to start that quarter from the field, but they were doing a great job of guarding and rotating, and there's so much versatility in playmaking defensively that no, they do not have the stay in front of you foot speed that we've really focused on a lot this year, but they do have a lot of guys who can draw a charge, get a steal, get a stock, and all of that I think is super important. And to your point, Jovan, about the improved 3-point shooting, I think when you see that across the board the way that we're seeing it recently, I think a lot of times it can be indicative of better process throughout the play. Especially since the Kennard trade, I feel like he's a spark for this, but I don't want to act like he's the whole reason for it. But their ability to drive and kick and replace and just kind of keep the wheel moving, keep the blender on, they've been so much better at that out of whatever set it is that they run in the first place, or if they do just come down court and run a drag screen, the simple attacks and just extending the advantage, just keeping it going. They've just gotten a lot better at that, and I think that the 3-point percentage is a function of them getting just better looks and better rhythm and all of that. That's a factor in that as well.
Yeah, it was always a matter of like, even if the Lakers had a good shooter before, no team was ever going to see LeBron on the ball and shade off of even a good shooter to not get in LeBron's way or not get in Luka's way or not get in Austin's way before. Now, when you have a shooter like Luke Kennard, who is truly, as Jovan said, the best shooter in terms of percentage from 3-point range, that is now a question that defenders are asking themselves. Wait, what do we do here? And now forcing them into that question. And then on top of it, Kennard being this connective tissue who does keep the blender. He makes such quick decisions. I wish he was quicker to make a decision on shooting more frequently, but he does often make what winds up being the proper basketball play that does either put teams helplessly in the blender or finish the blender and take full advantage of the blender in ways that, sorry, Gabe, you did not. The other thing I wanted to talk about here, Pete, I kind of mentioned it at the top of the show in terms of like this team being from a human being standpoint, a fascinating watch. Watching LeBron, I had said this on the show after the Lakers had won the first 2 of their 9 in a row that they won. In the way that the Lakers were defending, it was like they cannot defend that way if they have one guy who is constantly pacing himself. They cannot defend at the level that they need to defend if you have one guy. And if that one guy is LeBron James, who kind of sets the tone from an energy standpoint, you really can't have that. And my takeaway on my show, as realistic as it seemed at the time, or unrealistic as it may have seemed at the time, was like, the Lakers are not better without LeBron James. But I do think they would be better with a little bit less LeBron James if it meant he would play harder in those minutes that he was out there. And that's kind of sort of what we've got. And I just want to sit here for a second and marvel at the fact that this dude with that resume is willing to check his ego to that extent and be able to open things up by playing that way for this team. That is truly special stuff. That is like some like Disney movie stuff that you would see in like the Mighty Ducks, where like Banksy is like, look, my wrist is magically fixed. Yeah. That's what we've seen from this dude. It's been incredible to watch.
It's a beautiful thing. And lost amidst his celebrity and just global following, he's a basketball nerd through and through. I've seen this up close with my own eyes, and even just watching him work out pregame at Crypto or at the facility in El Segundo, just like he is absolutely real about his love and nerdiness about the game. And that translates into like understanding how to set a good screen and how to pivot off of it. And all of these just like little itty bitty parts of the game that frankly, a lot of the players throughout NBA history that have been 25+ point scorers have been like, that's someone else's job.
Yeah, that's
a lot of times, you know what I'm saying? And whereas not only does he not have that mentality, he's like, I'm going to be an expert at this too. Nobody really focuses on that because there's a lot more to shine a light on, and there's the gaudy stats and the highlights and all of that. But just the level, the ability to fit in that way. That said, I feel like we're framing him a lot through this third option and sort of like just fit in type of guy. He's still out there, Jovan, like shoving you off and dunking on you with the left hand and making you look silly with a Euro step and pointing at you. Like, we're about to see a turn up from LeBron.
I love that.
Hell
play.
yeah. He's turning up
awesome.
athletically right now. He's turning up as an athlete that it always stood to reason that it was like LeBron's going to kind of – whatever LeBron has, we don't know. But whatever he has, he's going to save the best of it for this part of the season that's coming up right now. And this is a part, Jovan, where he's always – kind of ramped up a little bit athletically right at the end of the season to sort of get the freight train running. And man, he looks great.
I think it's easier to frame things with labels, right? And we say this guy's the number 1 option, this guy's the number 2 option, this guy's the number 3 option. And you can look at some of the data and be like, okay, let's look at usage percentage. That's going to tell you who's the 1, who's the 2, who's the 3. JJ came out and had his comments. But I think this is more of like a 2A, 2B situation between Austin and LeBron. Totally. And I think there's going to be matchups. I think it needs to be matchup dependent in the playoffs where there's going to be teams where LeBron is more of the entry point and playing out of him in the post or him as a screener and just leveraging his size and force and physicality against smaller front courts or at least smaller fours. That I think about OKC, I think about San Antonio, I think about even Houston and some of the success he had against them in the 2 games there. Like those are some teams where I could see LeBron being more of the number 2, quote unquote, and Austin maybe taking a step back and being more of a shooter or a playmaker. Whereas I think about Denver and Minnesota, LeBron doesn't necessarily have the same physical advantages over Aaron Gordon and Julius Randle that he does against other fours. And Austin has played well against both those teams, not only this season, but in the past. And so I think you could then have Austin as more of the entry point of, okay, he could attack with his speed. And if like Jamal Murray's guarding him, okay, that's an advantageous matchup for Austin. So I think it's easy to put the labels on and it does make the processing and just how we analyze all this a little bit easier. But in reality, I think it's going to come down to like Luka's the number 1. We know that he's going to have a certain amount of usage, a certain amount of shot attempts. But behind that, it's going to be, does Austin have a better matchup or does LeBron have a better matchup? And how are they guarding some of those actions? And then how do you want to attack that? So I think we've seen that during this stretch. It's not like, this isn't like a hypothetical. This is in reality. We've seen them lean into LeBron sometimes more and then lean into Austin in other times. So in the aggregate, I think Austin will have the higher usage and probably attempt slightly more field goal attempts, but that could flip in a series easily. And like, I think it should if the matchup dictates that.
That's part of why they've been able to win all of these games in the variety of ways that they've been able to win these games, is that options 2A and 2B here are both, I think, probably overqualified to be 2A or 2B, you know, and it's been kind of fun to watch that. I've said this a couple of times on my show, and I'm sure you guys kind of heard a lot of the same noise, but when the Lakers won their first couple of games and the conversation was like, oh, what are they going to do when LeBron comes back? Are the Lakers actually better without LeBron, right? Given the teams that they had beaten. One, we know that LeBron heard that noise because he has specifically alluded to it, right? He has spoken about it and laughed it off as he deserved to laugh it off. But also, when they had won those first couple of games, in some of the conversations I had, the people that I was speaking to, whether it be closer to LeBron or closer to the Lakers or both, was like, you know, hey, how do you think LeBron's going to fit into this? And the response that I got at the time was like, watch, this is going to be kind of fun. And that kind of quiet confidence told me, oh shit, something might be happening. And this might be kind of let's kind of like really kind of focus in on what he does. And yeah, he's the smartest basketball player that the sport has ever seen. And this idea that he hadn't been taking note of what specifically the Lakers needed from him is asinine. It's disingenuous mostly, but if it isn't disingenuous, it's outright asinine that this dude would not be able to figure this out eventually. And I do kind of think that it was a variety of factors that we hadn't, you know, explaining why we hadn't seen it earlier, right? Like, I think this has been a very conservative approach to the season from the medical staff. They wanted everybody healthy to be able to go on this kind of run and have everybody healthy for the playoffs. But I also think from LeBron's standpoint, he's also like, it takes a lot of work to rebound and defend and set screens to the extent that I have to. I need to, if I'm going to do this, I need to do it. And we can't waste those stretches where I play like that. It's been awesome to watch it all come together. Part of the reason that it has been able to come all together is because Luka's been so effing good. And the stuff that this guy is doing, I usually hate the cliche of like, don't take this for granted. But then I listen to how people talk about this dude nationally. I'm like, oh, okay. We do have to remind people not to take this for granted. Jovan, you said it. Steph Curry type shooting numbers. He's also getting into the paint where he's among the lead leaders, if he isn't still one of the best scorers in the paint in the sport. Getting to the free throw line. And he's also been significantly better defensively to where I think in March, he's among the league leaders. If he isn't the outright, I haven't checked it today, but among the league leaders in steals as well. If this wasn't happening in purple and gold, I think there would be a lot of MVP conversations, and probably specifically if it was happening in OKC. But like the stuff that we're watching from Luka is just absurd. It's like some of the best basketball any of us will ever see. I know I'm putting you on the spot again here, but like try to contextualize what it is that we're watching from this guy. Is he like approaches his prime? He's like entering his prime right now.
It's incredible. It's, this is some of the best basketball I think anyone has like ever played, period. I know that sounds hyperbolic, but like looking at the numbers he's been putting up lately, it's not normal to do that on that level of efficiency. And the latest thing was he just averaged over 40 points per game on this 6-game road trip. First player to do that since Michael Jordan in 1986, so 40 years ago. Then he just passed 80 and Kareem for most career 40-point games as a Laker, which is like, just think about how long Kareem was a Laker for. Even AD was a Laker for 5.5 seasons. Like it is just wild that Luka's been a Laker for 13 months and he's already passing both those guys. So he's on a special trajectory, and I think to some extent, like the award stuff can be tied to team success. So I think if this had happened maybe in late January rather than late February, early March, I think he would have had a longer runway within some of the award stuff. But the dialogue with Luka before this stretch was just outright ridiculous. And for so many people, forget back then, like even as recently as this week, still advocating for Luka to not be a first-team All-NBA guy or to not be, on the MVP ballot. Like it's absolutely ridiculous. I do think this is an insane MVP race that can be up there with the likes of 2017 and 1990 and maybe a couple of other years, where right now you can make a case. Nikola Jokic, 3-time MVP winner who's been top 2 in the last 5 years, is having his best statistical season, and he might finish 4th in MVP. Shea is having a better season than he did last year statistically. He is the front runner right now, but like maybe San Antonio catches OKC and then Shea doesn't win it. Wemby is playing out of his mind. Spurs have just quietly gone 25-2 over their past 27 games. They've been the best team in the NBA in 2026, and Wemby's putting up these astronomical numbers where you look at the on-off splits, like they're basically unbeatable with him on the floor, and they're a lottery team with him off the floor. Then you have Luka, who, is leading the league in scoring, doing so very efficiently, top 3 in assists, and then the past month he's been at an even higher level than that. So like, it's just, this is an all-time race where only one of those 4 guys is going to win. 3 of those guys are unfortunately not going to win, and all 3 of the guys who don't win are going to rightfully be able to say, I should have been MVP. It's just only one of them can win. But what he's doing right now is just incredible. And I think to your earlier point, like we should not be taking this for granted, because this type of efficiency combined with the scoring volume is just absurd.
Yeah, and the point you made about like this is some of the best basketball that's ever been played is 100%, because while he's doing all of that, it's not just the steals are the loudest part of it on the defensive end, but he is part of the Lakers scheme and is using his size and physicality. We always overlook the defensive rebounding as a part of his defense and how key he is on a team that switches as much as the Lakers have. One thing that's happened over the last month is they've run a little bit less zone, and they've been a little bit more within their man scheme and within their switching and all of that. And that demands a player like him to be able to crash the boards and kind of rebound out of disadvantaged scenarios. They've been putting 2 on the ball a little bit more, like they did with KD, they did with Jamal Murray. Hard to rebound when you're scrambling out of those circumstances, and got to get back to that. And so Luka's ability to sort of just end a possession with getting the board on top of all of that, like there's been on top of just the incredible level of skill, like on top of everything that Jovan said, his ball handling ability is something that I really want to focus on, just in general going forward with him, of just his ability to dribble and get himself open and create advantage. On top of all that, we see the shot making and the 13 3-point attempts and all that, but you can't get that volume of shots in the first place, especially as an on-ball player, without the ball handling moves and all of that. And just at his size, to have
the Houston game, I mean, that masterclass down the stretch.
That's like one of the most athletic teams, not just this year, but like maybe of all time. And he has Amen Thompson, who's like an Avenger out there.
Yeah.
And he just, Amen had nothing to do with him. He could do nothing at all to slow down Luka in that game.
Yeah. Just had them on a string, absolutely. And so, yeah, that just all of it. I can't wait for the playoffs. I can't wait to see what LeBron has left and what level Luka can get to. That's the thing about both of them too, is they're both playoff risers historically. And so, I don't know, man. I feel good about the team. DA's looking good. Marcus, if he didn't fall apart before the playoffs, the bench is looking. I don't know. Like we're in a good spot. We're in a good spot. There's still a few more boxes to check, but excited about where we're at.
We'll allow that to segue us into that title tier conversation. And this is a spot where heading into the season, my title tiers were OKC, Denver as kind of a tier unto their own. And then I had a jumble of, I didn't even have San Antonio in the second tier. I thought we were a year away from them. But they have obviously changed that conversation. And then I think most people had the Lakers either in the second tier or the third tier of the Western Conference, let alone the league in its entirety. But I think with what we've seen from Luka during this stretch, given that I think, he's only going to play more minutes and he's only going to be more productive in the postseason, given that LeBron is only going to do the same, and we've seen LeBron what he can do in a postseason setting, and given what we haven't seen from some of these other teams, right? Houston has kind of imploded over the course of the season. That Fred VanVleet injury, them not getting a point guard replacement for Fred VanVleet, I think might go down as one of the dumber decisions of the season. Them losing Steven Adams, I think, completely changed their entire makeup of a team. They used to basically make up for their inefficiency offensively by just volume, improving their volume by getting themselves more possession on the offensive rebounding in offensive rebounds. That has gone away. So I think they're probably going to be the Lakers' first round opponent. Minnesota has been off and on. And I think they are kind of in that Houston class of team. Denver hasn't been able to get healthy basically all year. They have finally started to look a little bit more healthy now. So maybe they get it together and they put themselves in that tier. I have the Lakers in the same tier as the Thunder and the Spurs going into the postseason. I just truly believe in both LeBron James and Luka Doncic, now that they have the reps together as the foundation of a really good playoff team. Pete, you made a face there. So where do you have the
Me?
The Lakers? Yeah. I always know when to go to you because you're like,
yeah, my great poker face, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
So I don't have us in the same tier as OKC, and I am, as somebody who started the season as like a skeptic on the Spurs, of just like, I need to see this from them. I'm enormously impressed with what they've won 22 out of 23 when Wemby played their last 23. I could go over my argument for why I think very highly of them, but I have those two teams as tier one, and that's it, with a little bit of respect toward Denver, right? Like that, I know that they're going to be there once the playoffs turn up and all of that. But for me, tier one is OKC and San Antonio, and tier two is Lakers, Denver, Detroit, and Boston. Those are the four teams in that tier. I don't like Minnesota this year. They've made back-to-back Western Conference Finals, and so maybe they make a liar out of me, and they're good next year, good in the playoffs too. But I see, but I also see them as in a higher tier than Houston. I really don't like Houston. I see them as closer to Phoenix than I see closer to any of the other teams that we've talked about. How do you view this from a tiered type of setup, Jovan?
I've been working through different variations as you guys are both speaking here. I kind of have three teams in my inner circle, but they're split into two different tiers. So I'll share my three tiers, but tiers 1 and 2 are in an inner circle of, I think those would be my three favorites to win the title. Tier 1 for me is OKC by itself, because I look at the rest of the group, and like, I think there's maybe an alternate universe where Denver has Minnesota's health, and we're looking at Denver as maybe right there with San Antonio, and based on their pedigree and just, their track record in the postseason, we're viewing them as the second biggest threat to OKC. But Denver hasn't quite put it together. I could go team by team, but like I just, I look at the East. I think I would probably favor whoever comes out of the West over the East. San Antonio is just unproven, and if you look at NBA history, even the last decade, like Golden State took a couple of times to a couple trips. OKC took a couple trips. Boston took many trips before they finally broke through. Denver took a few trips before they broke through. So these young up and coming teams, even if they win 58, 60 games in the regular season, you typically lose in round 2 or 3, and it takes you, at least another postseason trip to kind of get over the hump. So I say that to say, for me right now, my inner circle would be tier 1 OKC by themselves. Tier 2, San Antonio, and Pete, close your ears, Boston. I do think Boston is the team to beat in the East and the most likely team to represent the Eastern Conference. So just by that nature, I give them the kind of that respect in that circle. And then for me, tier 3 would be Lakers, Nuggets, Knicks, Cavs, and Pistons. Not in that order necessarily, but I think it's the other 3 teams in the East that they all are relatively close for me. And then Lakers and the Nuggets are the final 2 teams in the West that I could see potentially making a conference finals or even the finals. So I would say like that's my top 8 split into 3 different tiers.
Yeah, my problem with like the Cavs and the Knicks being in the same tier as the Lakers and I get it because it's the East and somebody has.
It's more because of the East. I think head to head, I would pick the Lakers over both the Knicks and the. So maybe you could kick the Knicks and the Cavs out, I guess, but also the Pistons are improving. Like they're kind of San Antonio East. I have more faith in San Antonio and Wemby. I guess
we need to see what happens with Cade Lum, which is a crazy thing to have to say about a
fair. Yeah.
So here's the other thing about the Lakers being in this, that I would have them in that tier with San Antonio. I completely agree, Jovan, about like San Antonio is not just facing the team that they play, but they're also facing NBA history. In that, like these teams that are built through the draft like that, they don't win championships in their first foray into the playoffs. That is just basically never happened before. And maybe the argument is that like Wemby is just so unique as the best player on that kind of a team, that he's so far ahead of like where KD was with the Thunder, where Steph was with the Warriors, where Shea was with the Thunder most recently, that maybe Wemby is just so different that changes everything. But even he, like, I want to see how he handles a team with 7 games of being able to figure out how to guard him in that spot too. The Thunder, I've never really been as high on the Thunder as their stats scream at us that I should be. And part of it is that like they weren't that the Nuggets last year weren't that good, and they probably beat the Thunder if they have like one more decent basketball player on their team. And Jokic still scares me more than anybody in the conference. And that is probably like, he is why I would give Denver the amount of respect that I think we all of us are. But with the Lakers, like it's hard to throw so much faith behind a team that is starting DeAndre Ayton going into the playoffs. But DeAndre Ayton as your starting center with Jackson Hayes better slotted as the backup center, like, all right, I feel like there's enough ammunition there that calms some of those, waters for me. And then finally, I just have to think that JJ Redick does better in the postseason this time around than he did last year. And he has been like, we didn't actually touch on him when we were talking about like this turnaround. I think he has been a very big part of it. Mm-hmm. And he was embarrassed by last year's postseason run. And maybe that leads to him being like overly competitive, and maybe he overthinks things as a result of that. But I think that like with the way that he seems to have figured out how to get to Luka, how to get to LeBron, how to get to Austin, and push those buttons and get the team to like, I've been really impressed by the Lakers moving away from some of the gimmicky zone stuff and doing a little bit more man-based concepts on defense, and succeeding while doing so. Like, they're just such a different team from going into this postseason compared to last year. And yeah, that series against Minnesota was bad, but that was to the team that eventually got to the Western Conference Finals last year. And I don't know, I just really believe in what we've seen from this team. The other thing that I want to talk about from a looking beyond this season standpoint is, like, I feel very differently about some of the guys on this roster as we approach this upcoming offseason. And I don't want to spend too much time on this, because I think part of the appeal to this run that they have been on is that it's past the deadline and we basically have to analyze the basketball. And that's been like part of why this has been such a fun stretch. But has this run changed what you're hoping for from the Lakers this upcoming offseason, Pete?
For me, it's provided a degree of clarity on what the roadmap is going forward. For one, I think they've got a lot of good. They don't need to tear it down to the studs and make it this entirely different group with a bunch of different people. Like, one point that is always going to be a focus going forward is sort of can Luka and Austin be the duo that you build around going forward? And there's going to be contract stuff and all of that. But one thing that's undeniable is they have amazing chemistry as people together.
Yes.
And that's difficult to quantify in terms of like stats and all of that. But if you're trying to create a winning environment, having your two best players, and who knows if they're able to add another player that sort of replaces LeBron as a max type of guy, we'll see. But if you want to establish a culture, just having your two guys like that on the same page, like, I will be super sad and very upset if Marcus ends up leaving. I think Jake at $6 million has been one of the stabler type of players. I think we talk a lot about Austin's cap hold being a great benefit for team building over the course of this season, because it's only going to be like 20.9 million, I think, something like that, which is a lot less than what he's actually going to make. Jackson Hayes' cap hold is $4.5 million, and Lakers have full bird rights on him. And so he's probably going to make more than what he makes this season. But if the Lakers wanted to lock him up long term, it's still only going to be under the cap for the $4.5 million. Like, it's a similar benefit, not as big as Austin, but that's there too. And so there are just several guys on the team for me. Jovan, that are either like that, where I'm like, I'd really like to have that guy back, or others in Rui and Kennard, like that, where I'm like, at the right price, I'd really like to have you back too. And I just don't think the Lakers need a ton of change. I think they need an athletic four. And so I don't think it's coincidence that LeBron turning up athletically sort of makes everything kind of fall into a more natural place. And so when I'm like, my number one dream pie in the sky guy, they're not going to move him. But like Scotty Barnes, I think would be amazing next to Luka and Austin. But it's all those type of guys, the Barnes, Giannis, Zion, the athletic type of four type of guys that can really have that downhill force, wow. Okay, Miha.
I like that your dog was like sad that you didn't think Scotty Barnes is going to happen.
Yeah.
Oh, come on.
Miha's back home. I'll save you the whole story, but I'm dog sitting for my brother, so I think she's missing it a little bit. But yeah, like that's what it is for me, Jovan. It's like, don't toss aside the good things that you have, even if they're the small good things, and that they need some athleticism in the front court. That's just kind of the main thing they need to look for.
Yeah. So I'm of two minds of this or with this, because I, on the one hand, feel better about the foundation and how it fits together and what its both floor and ceiling can be. And I'm with Pete I think they should try to bring back a lot of this group. I would still say that my two biggest needs for the group, though, have not changed, where I think at the end of the day, like, the best deployment of DA and Marcus are as high-level bench players and not guys that the Lakers are relying on to the extent that they are being relied upon. So I still think they need, for me, a starting 5 and a starting 3. And if DA opts in and you can't flip him, I'm okay with him in a backup role. With Marcus, I would be cool with him in like a 6-man role where he's like basically the 6th starter, and maybe he plays in some small ball groups or closes situationally depending on what's going on. But like, I still view those like short term. I would be cool with Marcus if you can't find that 3. Okay, Marcus can be maybe the starter for one more year, but I still think when we look at the rest of the West, even though there are teams that I would put the Lakers ahead of, at least from a starting group perspective, I think those spots in the rotation are just objectively weaker than other teams. Like I don't think DeAndre would not start for any of the other top 5 teams in the West. Marcus, I think, with his recent play over the last like month and a half, you could debate maybe him versus DiVincenzo, or maybe like him versus Eason. They would shift it to a smaller group and have Marcus as like maybe the primary ball handler, which would kind of be wild for Houston, or like Denver, maybe him versus Christian Brown. You could debate, but like for the most part, I think most of those teams would pencil in Marcus as a bench guy. And now the Lakers have the top end talent, obviously with the 3 best players on the team, but like I think my biggest kind of gripe in general with this group, and what to me would shift this from like maybe they're on the same level as OKC or San Antonio to like them clearly being on the same level as OKC and San Antonio, would be, I think a lot of the rotation is shifted up 1 to 2 spots too high. And if you just added in basically a better starting level center and better starting 3-and-D guy and shifted those guys into bench roles and moved everybody else down, I think the pecking order would make a lot more sense, and they'd be more on that level as an OKC or San Antonio. I think that's like really the big difference for me right now, is like those teams have like, like, I mean, look at OKC. OKC has Kason Wallace and AJ Mitchell and Alex Caruso as their 3 bench guards. Like that's just absolutely absurd. It's an embarrassment of riches. So I think the Lakers could add some of that starting level depth still, but I'll say this. One thing I have shifted on is like, I think if they end up keeping LeBron, I'm much more optimistic about that fit potentially for next season. Now there's like the question of his just being 42, year 24, like how can he physically hold up? But I think like the fit with the big 3 the last 3 months has been much better than the first 2 months of the season, and even better than last year. Like last year they were, I think, finished the season with a -1 net rating, including the playoffs. It was like still relatively pedestrian, but this year, especially turn of the calendar year, they've been dominant together and have just been crushing people.
Do you view Champagnie as being on a different tier than Marcus?
So that's another one. I talked about this last night on my show. No, I don't. I think he's just bigger. So if you started Marcus, I think Marcus is better than Champagnie, to be clear. I just think from a size perspective, I think he's like 6'5", 6'6". He's kind of like their 4. I know Marcus is like, he can play up, obviously, and we've talked about he actually, he's 6'3". So like, if you started him, now you're starting him, Vassell, Castle, and Fox. I just think you're just like a little bit smaller, but
I'm not doing.
I think Smart's better than him for sure.
Yeah, I'm not saying like do like a swap, have Marcus on San Antonio necessarily. Just from a like, I think that if you looked at some of the other top tier teams, like they start guys. I don't know. Marcus doesn't strike me as like being out of place.
I guess like I think he's a starting level player, but I think the difference, I guess, between him and some of the other teams, in my opinion, is like I just think it's different when Marcus Smart's your starting 3, or like Jaden McDaniels is your starting 3, or or you have an like. I guess it's more so a role deployment of, I would like him more as like the secondary perimeter guy rather than the primary guy. I don't think he's quite at the level of a McDaniels, Amen Thompson, a Caruso, like that type of guy. Like, so it's more so I would like more defensive reinforcements around him. And if he's like your second best perimeter defender rather than your best perimeter defender, and that could even still be starting depending on the configuration of the group. But maybe LeBron isn't back, and then you have Peyton Watson as your starting 4, and like that's maybe your primary guy, and Marcus is the second. Like, there's different ways it could go. I just more so mean from a talent perspective, I think they need a better starting defender than Marcus ideally next season.
I think that's totally fair. in both the 3 spot and the 5 spot, I'm trending more and more to Anthony's question that started this toward two-headed monster type of approaches, in that I find myself wanting a second Marcus, especially if you look at it from a cap and money standpoint. Like, I too like.
I don't think there's
McDaniel.
enough room on this planet for a second Marcus. Like, he's
Well,
one of one.
you know what would give me the zoomies the same way that Marcus signing with the Lakers did? We're talking about how like OKC is going to need to get out of money. We've talked about Dort and we've talked about others. You bring Alex Caruso back and have him and Marcus basically double team that role as that, that starting 2-3 type of guy that are both like, I don't know,
that could work.
You know what I'm saying? And also,
The only problem there, Pete, is that according to Twitter, the Lakers are only allowed to have one good white American on their team at any time. Like this thought that the Lakers, I know you guys have experienced this too, but when the Lakers got Reeves, they were like, well, they could lose Caruso. It's fine. It's like, no, I want both. Can we have both?
Man, the way things are trending, like we're gonna the
don't slander
Lakers,
Drew Timmy here. Don't you dare slander Drew Timmy.
My sexual Tyrannosaurus is I would never.
The 27 Lakers about to be whiter than the 57 Lakers, man.
People in Boston are like, man, that is a really good.
Don't get me
Lakers team.
started on that. This is the ending I deserve. Yeah. I made fun of them for years for this shit, and here we are.
We have kind of touched on it, alluded to it a little bit, and I do think this is the proper place to end this pod. I think this stretch has completely changed my outlook on LeBron's future with the team. I don't think you accept this role and play this hard in that role for a team that you are getting ready to cash out of at the end of the season. And I thought it was interesting that the other night Bronny gets first half minutes. That was something that kind of struck me as, I wonder what's, olive branch potentially. And I'm just want to throw to you, Pete. I'll drop this grenade on your lap this time because I often throw grenades in.
Thank you.
Jovan's.
Thank you.
Yeah. But do you think that this stretch in the regular season, and if the Lakers have a successful, even relatively successful postseason, that this has changed your outlook or desire even for LeBron to be back after the season?
Not really. I'd still be pretty surprised if LeBron were back next year. We'll see. But in terms of desire, like, I do think that there is some, it's very optimistic to be like, yeah, we're going to get rid of LeBron James and we're going to be better.
It's insane to me.
Right? Like that idea, that's it. I do think that there's, they're certainly lined up for the offseason between the cap space and the picks, but I'd have to hear what the other options are. So it's not to me like, oh, this would be the worst thing in the world if we brought LeBron back. By no means. I'd be a little bit surprised if that's where it landed. And I'd have to hear what some of the other alternatives were first. I do think that if we replace LeBron with just like Peyton Watson's, who I like, right? But just like 3-and-D type of players rather than we give this guy the ball against the set 5-and-5 defense type of thing. Like if you let LeBron walk out the door and don't have somebody that brings some of that back with him, I think we're looking at a different team next year that hits some walls offensively, that just like this path ahead for them is fraught with peril. But I don't know. Do you feel differently on that, Jovan? I'd still be a little surprised if he'd be back.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's 3 potential outcomes realistically, right? And I mean, it's not like breaking news, but he either stays with the Lakers, he goes somewhere else, or he retires, right? So I think just by nature of there being 3 options, 2 of the 3 or the other 2 options not being him returning to LA, like that by nature is more likely than him returning to being a Laker. But I would agree with Anthony in the sense of I think whatever percent that was at before has increased by a little bit. Now, I think one of the interesting factors is going to be the projected suitors and rumored suitors for LeBron aren't going to have cap space, aren't going to really have anything other than either a minimum contract or maybe aren't going to have Luka, aren't going to be in LA. but or who knows? But I doubt it. Aren't going to have like more than either the minimum or some sort of exception, right? So they like if he wants to go back to Cleveland, let's just say that's been the thing that's been out there in the ether. Okay, well, he's gonna have to go back to Cleveland on a minimum. With the Lakers, it's interesting though because they have the cap space, and like if it's one thing to be like, hey, LeBron, we can only offer the minimum contract. Like we don't really want to give up Jared Allen for free. Like then you don't have as good of a team. Like we want to keep our big four together, add you to that, and keep some of our bench pieces, and like this is all we can offer you. With the Lakers, it's going to be a different conversation because the Lakers could technically offer him 50, 55, whatever the cap space number ends up being, and it's going to be more of a negotiation of how low can that number get down to, and like, hey, if we give you 15 million, that's more than anyone else could pay you. You get to stay in LA, you get to stay with us, finish your career out here. But that also gives us a certain amount of flexibility. But like, I wonder where that number ultimately settles. That's like not disrespectful to him, because it's like, if he goes back to the Lakers on a minimum, like, yes, there will be Laker fans that love that and are, but I'm sure on some level he like, there's an ego pride element to this that again, it's different if it's a team that can only offer you that versus being like the Lakers only wanted to give him the minimum and now he's back for the minimum. So I just wonder where like that negotiation potentially goes and what that number and framework potentially looks like.
Between the lack of options that he has elsewhere, right? Like Golden State's a mess. Cleveland would have to move heaven and earth if it doesn't involve him just taking a minimum there. Like, and I just don't think he wants to play for Dan Gilbert on a minimum. Like Dallas without Anthony Davis still there, I think is less of an option than it was that when people were speculating is that being a potential option. I just don't see the option that is not like any better than just staying put where his wife would prefer to be, by the way. Unless like, Steve Ballmer gives him like some kind of a tree deal that like, maybe he figures out another way to do that.
Don't put it past them.
but like, I between him accepting and thriving in this role, his lack of options elsewhere, and by the way, his son is still on the team. Like he's going to tell Bronny, like, all right, good luck here, son. I don't necessarily see that either. So I am of the belief that I'll just go out on the limb. I think LeBron's back next year. I just don't see the avenue. And I also think that like that report from ESPN about however Jeannie reportedly feels about LeBron rescuing the team and all that stuff. Sometimes when that stuff is out there and it forces a conversation, I don't think it's a coincidence that comes out. We get the report that LeBron and Rich Paul and the Lakers are going to have a conversation. And I haven't heard anything from Rich Paul since. I don't think that's a coincidence either. So you can kind of throw all this together. And if the Lakers go on a bit of a run here and continue the run that they're now on into the playoffs, I think he's back. You know me, Mr. Optimistic. That's what I am known for. This has been an absolute blast, as it always is. I will get out of the way here, and Jovan, I didn't start with you last time, so I will let you plug whatever it is you would like to plug, and then Pete, if we'll just talk to you guys. We'll talk to you next time.
Just check out Buha's Block on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts in audio form, and then also check out Lakers Collective, which we're doing twice a week over on that channel. So this was a blast. This was long overdue. I hope we can get together, maybe do a playoff preview when we know we got that like dead week going into game one. Hopefully get together and preview what I think will be Lakers Rockets, and I'm feeling pretty good about that. I want to be careful because I was feeling pretty good about Lakers Wolves last year, but I do think this is different. Lakers are looking different. I think there's a lot more sustainable things that are happening right now with them. So excited for the first round.
Only thing for me to promote, I went on my rant today about NBA Media Awards voting. A little nugget from that. I went on that rant actually prior to us hitting record on this pod.
It was a great rant. It was a good rant.
I'll give away some of the bacon on the front end. Over the last 15 seasons, the Washington Wizards are the only team in the NBA with fewer top 3 finishes in the 8 major awards categories around the NBA. So tune into the LFR pod today to hear me rant about that. Crazy, yeah, right? And then the offside chat. Those have been super fun, and offside's now available on Android. So to our Green Bubble friends, come join us in the offside chat, watch the game with us, and yeah, that's it, man. This has been fun.
As always, you're listening to this on the Lakers Lounge channel, so make sure you guys are subscribed. Hit that like button, hit that subscribe button, turn on notifications, all of that good stuff. And until the next time you guys hear from us, I'm Anthony Irwin. That was Pete, Zayas, and Jovan Buha. Have a great rest of your evening. Make somebody else's, and we will talk to you guys when we talk to you.